Dad kicked me out, lied about rent, and now wants me back to stop my grandpa's financial punishment. I, F21, lost my mom when I was 14. Dad remarried when I was 17. My stepmom has a daughter, F15, she and dad had a boy M3, and now she just gave birth to a little girl. Anyway, I have worked since I was 16, to have so money to buy stuff for me. When I turned 18, dad said I was now an adult and should start paying rent. It was only $500. A symbolic amount since he would still cover food and other essentials. I was mad and we fought, but in the end I accepted, and that was the arrangement until 7 months ago. Dad came to me saying I had 2 months to move out, stepmom was pregnant and they would need my room for the baby. Which is insane because they both have private offices. My stepmom doesn't even need one since she's a SOM since the birth of my baby brother. Nonetheless, they told me I had to move. BTW, just an addendum, me and stepmom get well fine. We don't fight or bicker. I don't think this was a evil stepmom moment, but who knows? Me and stepsister are actually pretty close. I help her with homework, and talk about her personal problems. I do love her very much. Back to the story, I didn't know what to do. I'm going to a college, I want to be a civil engineer, and work part-time. I don't have the means to live by myself. I called my aunt, asking if I could move in with her for the time being, until I figured something out, offered to pay rent and all. She was aghast at what dad was doing. She said I absolutely could live with her, no rent needed, but also said she was going to deal with my dad. The next day grandpa came to our house, and they talked privately. I could hear my dad's angry voice, but couldn't understand anything being said. After a while grandpa came to my room and said I had 3 choices. The first was continue living with dad and stepmom like I was doing. Nothing would change except without paying rent. The second was moving in with him and Ama, or my aunt. Third was find a place of my own and he would pay the rent and costs for me. He said I didn't need to choose now, I could keep living with dad and if I changed my mind to just tell him. I was actually relieved I could still live with dad, and that this madness was over. But the following days and weeks, dad and stepmom were very hostile towards me, and I felt incredibly uncomfortable being in my own home. Even Cassie picked this up and asked me why they were angry at me. So I decided to move out and told grandpa. He said he would take care of everything. Few weeks later he moved me into one of his rental units. The apartment is lovely, he bought me a fridge, stove, and other essential items. He gave me a check for $15,000 saying this money is to help me start living on my own. And that as long as I am working or studying, I can live there rent-free, for as long as I want. My dad and I have been pretty low contact since I moved out. He never came to visit me, or I visit them. I miss them a lot, especially my stepsister, but I'm still hurt. 2 weeks ago, my stepmom gave birth, I visited them in the hospital. It was a little awkward, but nice seeing them and my baby sister. Anyway, few days ago dad calls me, saying he misses me, the children misses me, and I should move back home. He apologized for asking me to move out, etc., and I told him I would think about it. Yesterday I visited my aunt, and was telling her what my dad said, and my cousin laughed a little and said I'm sure he does. I asked what he meant, and that's when they told me a lot of, until now, unknown information. Basically, my dad's home is actually my grandpa's. As is my aunt's. Basically the deal he made with me, he did with all his kids and some grandkids as well. He never wanted any of his family to have to worry about basic stuff like house, and food, etc. When I called my aunt that time, she called grandpa, which was furious with dad, not only for kicking me out, also for charging me rent. That day he went to my dad's and tore him a new one, and threatened to have him evicted. But now the petty part, you know that $15K grandpa gave me? It's actually what I paid dad in rent all that time. And now he's making dad pay him back. Also, he's charging dad $1,200 for the rent loss in apartment I'm living in. Call me dumb, or naive, but until now, I never realized my dad didn't make that much money. We lived in a great house, always went on vacations, and lived very comfortable lives, but I guess grandpa has always been helping behind the scenes. Now my cousin thinks dad is struggling, with 3 kids at home, a single income, and having to pay it back to grandpa. So he says dad wants me back, because he imagines grandpa will stop punishing him if I'm back living with them. Honestly, I don't know what to do. I'm actually loving living on my own these past 6 months. But I do really miss them, I miss my siblings. I miss the life we had before all of this, but I don't know if moving back home is the right answer, and also, I'm hurt the reason he wants me back is money. Update 1. Before, just answering some questions people had. My aunt and grandpa are from my father's side of the family. My mom's side unfortunately I don't have much contact. My grandparents have passed away before mom. I have uncles and aunts, I see once in a while, but they don't live close. I also have 2 other uncles from my father's side, I'm close to them, but not as near my aunt. She was my rock when mom died. I consider her a second mom. My stepmom knew about the rent I was paying, it was implied stepsister would need to do the same when she turned 18. But I don't know if she knew dad didn't own the house, or the extent of how much grandpa has financially helped dad. To the update, Monday, the day after my post, I called dad and said I decided to not move back. I didn't mention anything I was told, just that was well settled here, and moving back seemed like a step back. But I also said I wanted to keep in contact with them. They could invite me for dinner whenever they wanted, and I also said I would love for my stepsister and brother to be able to spend time with me here at home. He was disappointed, and I didn't feel any angriness in his tone at least. But he basically said a we'll see and left at that. I was also disappointed. But then Friday he called me, asked me if I wanted to have lunch Sunday. Today, I said I already had plans with Grandpa and Grandma. He asked when I would be free. So we scheduled a dinner for Thursday. I haven't told any of this to my stepsister, we talk and text regularly. She also haven't heard they talking about me. But she did say her grandma, her mom's mom, is there to help with the baby and is being incredibly annoying. I laughed at that. I wanted to offer her to sleep over here, but didn't want to get her excited just for Dad to say no, so I'll try talk with them Thursday. The big update is I've just came back from visiting Grandpa and Grandma. We spent a lovely day together. But I also said I wanted to know everything that was going on. I wasn't a kid anymore and I felt like living in lies. The most important things were things my cousin and aunt told me last week. But there were a few more. Grandpa had been subsidizing quite often our basic needs, like school, healthcare, etc. Because Dad hadn't 1 cent saved up according to Grandpa. Also my college fund was mainly contributed by him, and Mom before her passing. I guess that makes sense. I was also dumb to not realize this sooner. He also have set up funds for my baby siblings. And also one for my stepsister. Because he didn't want her to feel excluded and not have the same opportunities as her siblings. This man is incredible. I love him so much. And yes, I'm very lucky. I've seen so many people commenting this, not in a derogatory way, but being very supportive and nice. I know I'm very privileged to have and parents and family members who can afford and are willing to help me. I hope one day I can help others the way they are helping me, anyways. I also expressed worries about Dad's financial situation. And he assured me Dad is fine, more than fine. He will have to be less frivolous with money for a while, but that he would never let any of his kids or grandkids to suffer, or be in the need for anything. As many of you said, he's trying to teach Dad a lesson I should have taught him a long time ago. So I'll stay out of it. I don't think I'll tell Dad that I know all of this. I know many of you said to confront him, but I think it's for the best if he continues thinking I'm oblivious. Lastly, we talked about why Dad kicked me out. He didn't have an answer either. I could see he and Grandma were very hurt by what Dad did. He said he asked for an explanation but got none. That's it for now. I'll continue trying to have a relationship with my siblings outside of my dad and stepmom. I also try to schedule some weekly dinner with them. I know what you guys said about my father is mostly true. But I need to at least try have a relationship with him, if not for him, for my siblings, and for me. But don't worry, I won't let him hurt me anymore. I hope things go well for you. There isn't much of an update, but some people messaged me asking about how was the dinner. So last Thursday I went there after work. Gosh. I missed my siblings so much. And I spend majority of the time with them. My baby brother is not a baby anymore, he have grown so much. My baby sister is so cute. I could eat her alive. I never want to be apart from them anymore, doesn't matter what happens. Cassie, I said her name once in my original post by mistake, she's my stepsister, is the only one I maintained regular contact through calls and text. She's just an amazing person as well. She knows I didn't move out in the best of circumstances, but doesn't know the details, or anything about the money. I asked if she wanted to have a sleepover at my house sometime, and she was thrilled. If I hadn't stopped her, she would have started packing at that second. My stepmom's mom was still there to help with the baby. And guess where she's staying? In my old bedroom. They transformed it into a guest room. And the baby room was stepmom's old office, because it's closer to the master. Honestly, that hurt a little. I've only met my stepmom parents a few times, they were always nice to me. This time she kept looking at me weird, all the time. Didn't matter where I was or where I moved, she was keeping track of me, like she was expecting me to try and steal something. When I was holding the baby didn't leave my side. Anyway, apart from that, dinner went as well as you can imagine. A little awkward, but I was glad I could see my siblings and spend a few hours playing with them. At the end I mentioned Cassie having a sleepover in the weekend. Her grandmother started saying that absolutely not, Cassie would not go. But to my surprise stepmom stopped her. She said if Cassie wanted I could pick her up Saturday after soccer practice. For dinner that was that. When I was leaving stepmom gave me a really tight hug. So many people were saying how she's just an evil stepmom that I kinda started to believe. But as I said in my first post, we always had a good relationship. I left very confused and emotional. Saturday afternoon I picked Cassie, we watched Inside Out 2, then we ate shawarma for the first time, which is basically a meat burrito. I don't see the difference, it was so good to spend the day with her. I'm so glad to have her in my life. Sunday I dropped her off, and went inside to see my other siblings. Dad wasn't there, he was out meeting a work friend. Some people asked what my dad does, he's a lawyer, and stepmom used to work for an advertisement company, but is now a som. We have another dinner schedule for Friday. I don't know if I'll ever find out exactly why they wanna me to move, or why charge me rent. I don't want to touch the subject now, because I don't want to jeopardize my relationship with my siblings. So I don't know if I'll have any more updates since things are settling down and is now just life. Update 2. Since my last update, things have been normal, from my side. I had another dinner with my parents the Friday before last. Stepmom's mom, who I'll call Ebby, meaning evil bitch, spoilers, was still giving me the dirty eye, but I ignored her. I had scheduled dinner with them for last Friday, and I was talking to them about taking my little brother to the park yesterday, but Wednesday my dad called me asking if I could instead postpone dinner, and instead go to Grandpa's on Saturday because he needed to talk with the whole family. Meanwhile I had been talking to Cassie and she's been telling me stepmom, I'll call her Shtay, and Ebby have been fighting a lot. Well, last Sunday Shtay's father shows up, I'll call him Laby, meaning lying bastard. There's a big fight and Laby and Ebby go back home on Monday. So yesterday afternoon I go to Grandpa's, my aunt was there as well, then Dad and Shtay arrive with Cassie. Dad was clearly embarrassed. He apologized to me, to my grandparents. Shtay apologized to me as well. And Dad gave an explanation, apology, reason for everything that happened in the last few years. Some things I already knew, but Cassie didn't, she was present for the whole thing. So I'll try to tell everything here. I don't know how coherent I'll be, but I hope you can follow me. Years and years ago, Grandpa and a friend started a company. The company was very successful. When Dad was 25, Grandpa sold the company and made a lot of money. So he decided to gift each child a home. He gave his kids $350K each, with the promise they would use to buy homes or pay out the mortgages. Grandpa had seen people lose their homes, and didn't want that to happen to his kids. Dad didn't buy a home however. He actually moved to New York, to start his own practice and become a big and successful lawyer. And as you can imagine, things didn't turn out so well for him. Half a decade later, he has no money left, can't pay rent, so he reaches out to Grandpa, and moves back home. Grandpa helps him find a job with a buddy of his. After a while, Dad starts to put his life back together, rents a home and move out from Grandpa's, meets my mom and starts dating her. They fall in love. After a while he asks to marry her. Before they married, Grandpa came to them, and said he would gift them a home. He had already talked with his other kids, and they were fine with it. But because he didn't trust Dad, and the home is so Dad's future kids would always have a roof over their heads, the home would stay in his name, and in his will, they would go directly to Dad's kids. So I was actually mistaken before. My uncles and aunt don't live in homes owned by Grandpa, only my dad does. And I think 2 cousins of mine as well. Next thing I was born. Life is good for a while. Then Mom passes away. Dad struggles with taking care of me alone. That's when Grandpa starts to help financially. Few more years, Dad meets Shtay, but Dad is embarrassed about not owning the house, and that Grandpa is helping him, so he never tells Shtay any of this. For her dad was just a moderately successful lawyer. They marry, she becomes pregnant, she asks if she could become a full-time som, and Dad is embarrassed to say no. So he tells her it's fine. In the meanwhile, now with 3 kids, plus a som wife, Dad is struggling even more, Grandpa is helping more, and Dad's savings are being diminished day by day. Dad admits that he kinda threw Shtay under the bus to Grandpa, blaming her for his financial problems to Grandpa, so Grandpa would continue helping for the sake of the kids. Now I need to go back a little and talk about Laby and Ebby. Just as Shtay, they think Dad is a rich successful lawyer. And they start saying to Dad how he's spoiling me, how I'm gonna be irresponsible with money, how I have an easy life. That when Laby was my age, he had to pay rent to his dad, and he did the same with his son, Shtay's brother, and how successful they became, never needing anything from anybody, bootstraps, etc. 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 And apparently that got into Dad's head. He became afraid I would be dependent on him, or more likely Grandpa, and his money, instead of being successful on my own. He became afraid I would be a failure like him, that still needs his dad to bail him out. So he started getting parenting advice from his in-laws. Why not ask his own dad, who's much more successful and raised 3/4 of his kids to be successful as well? I asked. And apparently, it's because he felt embarrassed, that comes up again and again and again to explain Dad's action. Embarrassment. He didn't want Grandpa to think even less of him. Therefore the rent idea, which was a suggestion from Laby. Dad says his initial plan was to save the money and give it to me later. But with a new kid, Shtay not working, and trying to project to Shtay and his in-laws how things were fine, saving the money became impossible according to him. BTW, he also lied to me here at the time, saying it's a normal thing to do, that Grandpa had done it to him and his kids. Which is a lie I discovered 8 months ago, but with everything else that happened that seemed small at the time. There's a detail that I didn't disclose in my previous posts because it didn't matter, or so I thought. And that is I'm part of the LGBTQIA+ community. I don't hide this fact, in fact I was already out to my mom before her passing. But it's not something I advertise either. That'll become relevant later. Anyways, continuing. Laby becomes Dad's confidant, and he starts to open himself to him about his money troubles, and Laby start to say things like I should move out, and things like that to Dad, which is rejected initially. Then Shtay becomes pregnant again. And Dad panics. Hats when Laby and Ebby come to Dad, and say they would help him, not only financially, but Ebby would move in with him and stay after the baby to help out, and even convince stay to go back to work, since Ebby would be there taking care of the kids. But for that I needed to move out. Their reason is because the home wouldn't be able to accommodate Ebby, and that it was time I left the nest, etc. 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 So they convinced Dad I needed to move out. Dad didn't tell Shtay any of this, keep in mind. Only that he thought it was the best for me, and the baby coming was just a great opportunity. According to them, Shtay was against this, but Dad pulled my daughter, I know best card, so she deferred to him. They tell me I need to move out. I talked about this from my point of view. That day Grandpa goes to my dad's home and they have a huge fight. Not only Dad and Grandpa, but Dad and Shtay. Because it was then she discovered Dad didn't own the house, Dad had almost no savings, and Dad was dependent on Grandpa. Dad's deal with her parents was still a secret. At this point I asked Shtay, why then she acted so hostile towards me after that day, so much that made me unwelcomed and wanting to move out. And she looked shocked. She apologized to me and started to cry. Saying that she was never mad at me, but at Dad. That she had no idea she was to blame for me moving out. I was crying as well. I said it's not her fault, and guys, I know many of you have said bad things about her, and I don't blame you. But I do believe her. The look on her face when I said I felt unwelcome and that's why I moved out, it's not something you can fake. Now I'm thinking she's as much of a victim of my dad's actions as me. And all this time she was just trying to give me space. So going back to events, I move out. Grandpa not only cuts Dad from all financial support, but starts to charge him money for the house. The only thing he continued paying for is Cassie's education. Now everything is in the open, and Dad and Shtay have to cut everything. Dinners, expensive foods, sell her car, etc. Labi and Ebby give them some money as well to help out. Poor Shtay is stressed out, pregnant, with a lying husband. I'm actually sad for her and what she went through. I was looking at Grandpa, and I could see he was as well. I don't think he realized the amount of stress he was placing on her. I don't know how he will proceed from now on regarding Dad and the house. Before the baby is born, Ebby moves in with Dad and Shtay. Shtay gives birth, things are normal. But with the new baby, Dad feels even more guilty over what happened, and that when he calls me. Again, this part I already told you. Jumping to when I went to dinner the first time. Dad and Shtay also recognize Ebby acting strange towards me. After I left they talked, nothing came from it. But Shtay kept talking to Dad about her mom. And Dad started to tell her his conversations with Ebby and Labi, about money and raising kids, etc. After my second dinner. Shtay confronted her mom, and they had a huge fight. And apparently that's when she said something in the lines of I can't believe you're letting that slur back into your home after getting rid of her, and that's when the coin dropped for Dad, and he realized how much of a fool he has been. They kicked Ebby out, Labi came to pick her up and they had another fight. Dad actually wanted to act as nothing had happened. Continue with me visiting, and rebuilding the relationship. But Shtay put her foot down and said he needed to come clean, about everything, not only to me but Cassie, and everyone as well. And so we came to the present. I was crying, Shtay was crying, Cassie was crying, Dad was crying, Aunt was crying, Grandpa was crying, Grandma who hadn't said a single word was holding me tight. According to Dad, that's all. No more lies, no more deception. Dad and Shtay left after that. I slept at Grandpa's because I was in no state to drive. Came home this morning, took a fucking long shower. Cried a lot. And now I'm typing this out to see if it helps me make sense of all of this. Make sense of my thoughts and feelings. I guess that's the end of the story. I don't know what I'm gonna do now. I feel sad, angry, sorry for Shtay and Cassie. I feel everything and nothing. I'll be calling my therapist tomorrow to see if we can book more sessions. I've been going every Friday, but I can't wait a whole week. On the bright side, whoever had bet evil step-grandmother, won. Now on to second story. Excluded my coworker from my wedding due to her strict dietary restrictions, and now the whole office is turning against me. I work in a small office, and we're a pretty tight-knit group, so I decided to invite most of my coworkers. There's one coworker, let's call her Jane, who I get along with well enough, but we're not super close. Here's the thing, Jane has a lot of very specific diet restrictions. She's vegan, gluten-free, and allergic to a bunch of common ingredients like soy and nuts. Whenever we have office lunches or potlucks, it's always a bit of a challenge to accommodate her, and sometimes she just brings her own food because it's easier. When I was working with my caterer to plan the menu for the wedding, I realized how difficult and expensive it would be to create a dish that Jane could eat. I was already stretching my budget, and the thought of spending extra money to accommodate just one guest felt overwhelming. So, I made the decision not to invite Jane. I felt bad, but I rationalized that we're not that close, and I'd rather avoid the stress and additional cost. I didn't mention anything at work, but word got out that I was inviting other coworkers, and Jane noticed she wasn't included. She confronted me about it and seemed really hurt. She said she thought we were friends and that she would have been happy to bring her own food if it was an issue. Now, some of my coworkers are giving me the cold shoulder, and I'm wondering if I really messed up. I didn't want to make her feel excluded, but I also didn't think she'd want to come if I couldn't accommodate her diet. Ida for not inviting Jane to my wedding because of her diet restrictions? Update 1. It's been a few days since I posted, and I've had some time to reflect on the situation and your responses. After reading through the comments, and honestly, after sitting with my own thoughts, I've come to the conclusion that, yes, I was the asshole in this situation. I won't lie, it's not easy to admit this. When I first made the decision not to invite Jane, I genuinely thought I was being practical. I convinced myself that since we weren't that close, it wouldn't matter much to her. But in doing so, I completely overlooked the fact that this isn't just about logistics or budgets. It's about relationships and how our actions, even those we think are small, can have a significant impact on others. I realize now that by not inviting her, I wasn't just excluding her from a celebration, I was sending a message that she wasn't worth the effort, and that's not the kind of person I want to be. And here I was, making her feel unwelcome because I didn't want to deal with a bit of extra planning. After the post, I decided to reach out to Jane directly. I apologized for not inviting her and explained that I was wrong to let my stress and budget concerns get in the way of our friendship. Jane was surprisingly understanding and appreciated the apology. We had a good talk, and while I'm not sure if I can undo the hurt I caused, I'm hoping we can move forward from this. I've also realized that sometimes, the effort we put into our relationships, especially during significant moments like weddings, is what truly matters. It's not just about who's closest to us but also about making people feel valued and included. So, for anyone out there planning a wedding or another big event, take it from me. Don't get so caught up in the details that you lose sight of the people who matter.